Lejoni në emrin tuaj dhe në emrin të gjithë stafit akademik të falenderoj Shkëlqesin e tij që ka pranuar ftesën. Shkëlqesia e tij sot do të trajtoj për ne temën konflikt apo kompromis, bisedimet hungareze të tryezës së rumbullakët, fillimi i procesit të tranzicionit në Hungari. Ja kaloj fjalën Shkëlqesisë së tij. Faleminderit.
Thank you. My first promise is to be not too long. The best briefings are that are not too long. Although it was second, that what I am now going to talk about is a part, a segment of the transition of changing the system in Hungary. More or less, the models of changing the system was similar. However, there were three different ways of changing the system. The first one was, let's call it, Middle Eastern European model. I'm going to talk about it in Hungary. There was a second one. It was, let's call it, the Yugoslavian model, which was not the round table model, but when the different elites in former Yugoslavia saw that the situation is going to change, they didn't choose the method of compromise, round tables. They just took arms and started waging a war. And the third one is the former Soviet Union, where Russia and the rest of the Soviet Union more or less peacefully changed the system, but the changing of the system was not quite 100%, so to say. The second idea is that these three different methods, I think for Albania and for everybody who wants to join EU, negotiations, compromise, understanding the different interests, is the right method of changing the system, because changing the system in Central Eastern Europe was because we wanted to join the EU again, because that part of Europe, a German politician called it Mitteleuropa, Middle Europe, wanted to belong again from the sphere of influence of the Soviet Union to the old European home, so to say. So that's why this peaceful, compromise-based method of changing the system, transition, was the only right way. But it takes time, it takes work. You can modernize this country with or without the EU, because the goal is to modernize Albania. You can do it without the EU, but it's much more difficult. Why not with the EU? But if Albania wants to join the club, so to say, then certainly there are conditions that should be met. So, what these so-called round-table talks were. The Hungarian round-table talks were a series of formalized, orderly, and highly legalistic discussions held in Budapest, Hungary, in the summer and autumn of 1989, and it was inspired by the Polish model. I will talk about it. The talks ended in the creation of a multi-party constitutional democracy, and so the Communist Party lose its 40 years grip on power. In East Central Europe, the Poles began the first transition to democracy. In historical perspective, one can say that the Polish negotiations had already started in August 1980, since Polish dissidents became the pioneers in inventing negotiations with the communists. You remember from your studies that in 1980 there was a rude, quite radical but still peaceful movement of Solidarność in Poland. The self-limiting revolution of solidarity set the pattern of behavior for other opposition groups in East Central Europe. For Poland, 1989 meant a decade-long transition from communism to democracy. Frequent personal contacts were developed between the members of the Polish and the Hungarian oppositions. Members of the Hungarian democratic opposition had long ago established friendships in Poland with Michnik, Huron, Smolar, and others, while the activists of the new Hungarian trade unions were eager to establish links with Solidarity in order to learn about the Poles' negotiating experiences. Just to mention that during that movement in Poland, Pope John Paul II was elected Pope. Transitions, peaceful transitions, are regarded usually as elite games. And it is true, it is hard to form a democracy without the existence of an elite, counter-elite, which are both willing to commit themselves to negotiating frames for a democratic process. The negotiated revolution in Hungary went well beyond the scope of small, well-organized elite groups. So it was not a coup d'etat, so to say. It was an elite-driven process, but it was not fully an elitist exchange. There was interplay between the masses and the elite and non-elite linkages were observable not on many different occasions and revealed massive popular support for the opponents of the communist regime. The negotiations were supported by large masses and led to the first post-communist re-elections in 1990. Who were the participants of the talks? The participants of the negotiated revolution had arrived from many different places and with very different biographies. Then one day they found themselves sitting next to each other and discussing the issues of democratic transition. Depending on their degree of involvement, they spent weeks or months together debating the future of the country. And after the historic moment had passed, they all went their own way. Some of them became professional politicians. And the second last message is that try to use your knowledge for the benefit of your country. Albania is a beautiful country. Albanians, listen, it is very easy to remain Hungarian, German, English or what, French or whatever. All those peoples have during the centuries boundaries, armies, universities, kings, alphabets, constitutions, whatever. Be proud that you remained Albanians without any of that. You survived for centuries, for thousands of years, without anything like that. You kept your identity, your language. Be proud of that. Form a nation, a real nation.
Me zotin ambasador ishte forumi I fundit për këtë Panair, por Panairi People to People nuk përfundon këtu. Sot në orën 19, Panairi vazhdon me festën e popujve. Popuj dhe kulturat e ndryshme ju mirëpresin të gjithëve.